Are we too sensitive nowadays? Many people would like to think so. I mean, on one hand, you have a lot of people getting offended by stuff. And on the other hand, you got people being offended by people being offended. I like to argue no. And here's why. So to be offended means that you're resentful or annoyed as a result of a perceived insult. By that meaning that anything can be potentially offensive. But does that count for sensitivity or just people being fed up or feel like they're being insulted? It seems that nowadays being offended seems like more of a problem than actually the offense caused. A lot of the cases you'll see on social media and stuff, there are people complaining about, oh, why are you being so offended? Why are people so sensitive nowadays? If X show existed in this decade, people would be too offended. And it's like, why is that a problem? People have their own thresholds for what they can and cannot take. And I think it's a bit insulting to other people's sensibilities that you would be insulted by their sensibilities. That they actually are insulted by their sensibilities. Now that I think about it, we've always had this idea of toughness in our society, this idea that we should somehow overcome our offensibilities and our sensibilities and get over being insulted or everything is just a joke. When really, I think at this point in this day and age also, people are just tired of that shit. To be constantly talked down to and punched down to is actually really irritating. And a lot of people are at this point in time, in this age of social justice warriors, quote unquote, we're tired. Every single one of us are tired of the same punch down jokes. That's why people aren't as fond of South Park anymore, or are quick to get at comedians for being comedians. Comedy is a really, really touchy subject nowadays. People are more concerned about the comedians being able to do their job than the actual people that comedians are potentially offending. Now, before getting to the main three subjects, what I want to refer to offensive media in this topic, let's talk about what punching down is and talking down. Not every group is made equal in humor or jokes or in just any part of society at this day and age. Considering a white person making a black person joke, it would be definitely seen as suspect. But a lot of people don't understand those boundaries or those power dynamics, so when they make jokes, they just think, it's just a joke, everybody's equal. Often a common misconception I hear is that, well, they're joking about everybody, it's all good. And it's like, no, fam. No. There's power dynamics at play. As a black straight guy, it would be weird for me to talk about women and punch down towards them, or gay people, or trans people. So I can't really make jokes to punch down towards them because they would definitely be offended and I would be talking from a place of privilege. But there are also jokes that punch up. Like there's a lot of conservative right-wing jokes nowadays because, well, they're kind of like the butt monkey of our society at the moment, even though they hold most of the power. But it doesn't come off as offensive because of the large amount of privilege that they have. That's why we can kind of make jokes about rich people at the same time because they have a huge amount of privilege and money and they're seen as a higher echelon of society while us brokies, we're broke. Now I'm basing this a lot on humor and jokes and comedy because those are the easiest subjects to talk about being offended and offensive sensibilities and things of that nature. My three main topics, or actually shows and comedians I want to talk about right now, are South Park, The Chappelle Show, and The Soapbox. And why each of them really either work well or don't work well within the realm of being offensive or not being offensive. Now, all of these have been offensive at some point in time. I'm not going to say they've not been offensive. There's some golden angel. But I am going to point out how one's shock humor, one's leaning on both sides, and one leans more on real sharp political satire. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on South Park because, frankly, it's low-hanging fruit. Matt and Trey, the creators of South Park, tend to have this I don't give a fuck about if you're offended or not attitude. And that attitude is actually pervading a lot of the millennial generation. A lot of people call back to South Park and be like, well, we watch South Park and Family Guy and et cetera, et cetera. and usually use that as a point as to why we shouldn't be sensitive, but frankly, I think the opposite is the case. I feel like as time has gone by and changed, that Matt and Trey have just stuck to that shock humor that at this day and age doesn't really, what's the word, really grip us anymore. Nowadays, when people look at South Park, it's like, well, people look at most shows like that have lasted forever in a really negative light. And nostalgia glasses don't really last too long. But for Matt and Trey, the shock humor has really died as a medium. And now in the Rick and Morty, BoJack Horseman era, the cynical stylings and shock humor has to have a really poignant point to them. And that's when you get to Dave Chappelle. Now, I'm going to talk about his stand-up and his show, but his show was mainly a bite on a lot of stereotypical American ideals. From the Black KKK lead to Rick James, or even the Prince story. A lot of Dave Chappelle's humor came from pointing out how ridiculous we are as Americans. And at the time, it really made a lot of sense. It was around 2004. His humor post Dave Chappelle show has gotten a little, and I wouldn't say dry. It's definitely gotten to a point where his sensibilities don't match the current society's sensibilities. At least to the extent to where you would think he would be at. Someone that's really good at satirical comedy. Let's just take his last few stand-ups where he made those trans jokes. A lot of people were like, oh, the trans jokes weren't that bad, but it did punch down to a certain group of people. The issue with the trans jokes is not only that they were offensive, but it looks into how comedy tends to protect itself when called out for its offensiveness. He made the trans jokes in one stand-up special, and in the second one he pretty much doubled down, but said he felt bad, but he doubled down. Doesn't really work that way. Now the third show I'm going to talk about, The Boondocks, actually came out around the same time, but somehow managed to be almost timeless. Just look at the R. Kelly episode. Instead of just being a sharp satirical parody of American society and black society and black culture, it also was less offensive than it was just really trying to bring a message. Usually people go back to the Story of Gangstalicious episode when they talk about how Boondocks wouldn't be really accepted today. I'd argue that they did not watch the episode right. Now that does sound presumptuous and a lot pompous and, kind of elitist, but no, you were watching the episode right. Story of Gangstalicious was about why a gay rapper could not exist in our current society. You remember I Love Maconin? Remember he came out and there were those rumors that Amigos didn't want to work with him because he was gay? Literally the Boondocks episode. Boondocks typically attacked certain trends and certain ideas about issues in black society, like the R. Kelly episode, the Gangstalicious episode. Even it had its moments where it could come off as offensive, especially the prison rape jokes and stuff like that. You also had the Tyler Perry episode, which offended Tyler Perry. As much as I like to joke about Tyler Perry, granted the jokes were a little, so fair enough. At the end of the day, the Boondocks could come out today and not have the same issues as a potential Dave Chappelle or a potential South Park. Even though South Park is kind of toning down the shock humor to be a little bit more satirical nowadays, it doesn't come off or doesn't have that same grandeur it had once when it came out back in the day. But that's because that kind of humor was new and fresh. But now that we have better sensibilities, in my opinion, about how humor should be taken, it's just not going to work anymore. Not shocking anyways. I think Deezus and Mero pointed out exactly why people can't seem to get their jokes to land. The joke has to be funny. Number one. To do a joke just to offend people or to say something that may offend people isn't enough. You have to actually have a really good joke behind it. And that joke can still be offensive, but at the same time, there has to be effort put into it. If you're just putting in effort just to make somebody offended or make somebody feel bad, or even if you don't think it should make someone feel bad, and you more than likely know it is, you have to put effort and actual smarts behind your jokes. Deezus and Mero is actually a really good example of a current comedian duo that's actually working really well within problematic material. Hell, their whole show has a problematic light during a podcast. So what does this all bring me to? There are consequences to being offensive. In one instance, you have people who are reinforced by the ideas being presented. On the other, you have people who wouldn't have never even thought of the situation at hand, maybe homophobia, maybe racism, or even those mediocre amounts of just that thing. It starts to perform a form of inception to the mind, to where they start believing those things. And then there's also the people who are those things, who feel minimized and inauthentic, or end up being inauthentic to themselves because they believe that thing is wrong, even though that's who they are at the end of the day. What ends up happening is we end up in a society where we think being mentally strong is everything. When we find that if you find yourself not offended by these things, you are a mentally strong person, that you are a person of integrity, that you are a person of infallibility, when at the end of the day it makes us weaker. Wanting to stand up for oneself shouldn't be seen as a bad thing. At the end of the day, that's what people who are offended are doing. They are standing up for themselves. Not standing up for yourself leads to an inauthentic self. And in a society that preaches individuality and rewards individuality, you would think that we'd be more wanting to stand up for ourselves. But instead, we're always knocked down. We're always offended. We're always seen as lesser because we want to stand up for ourselves. When shouldn't it be the other way around? Maybe, just maybe, the ones crying about sensitivity are the sensitive ones. Think about that.